many different countries around the world.
Julian in the front. You see him?
Do you know that there are Cub Scout girls in Australia and New Zealand? Their uniforms look almost exactly like yours, except they wear a skirt. But that's not how Baden Powell started out. You see, how many of you know who Baden Powell is? How many of you have heard the name Baden Powell? Me. He's a special guy. You see, Baden Powell, when he was about your age, decided that he did not like school. He thought school was just for the dogs. His favorite thing to do was go out at recess and find a spot back in the trees and hide. But not behind the trees. He would hide right out in the open. And his teachers would spend the next however long it took trying to find Baden Powell. Because he found it hilarious to make his teachers go look for him out in the fields at recess. You see, Baden Powell was a woodsman, even at your age. He liked to climb trees. He thought it was better to spend his life outside than ever to be in a stuffy classroom. It's not to say that he didn't get his education, though, because after too long, the school teachers got wise to what he was doing, and they started figuring out how he was hiding. He was using something that used to be called stalking. Stalking is where you, in plain sight of your prey, if you happen to be a bear and you're going after something, you'll take slow, deliberate steps because you don't want to scare off your meal. Well, we're hunters. Man is a hunter. So the only way he's going to be able to reach his meal is if he's very quiet and very slow in how he moves. So that's how Baden Powell got his start. Missing school kind of hurt him, though, because the first time he took the test to be a member of Her Majesty's Cavalry. Can anybody tell me what cavalry is? No. Yes, sir. Army? It is Army, but cavalry had a very special job. Today, our cavalry drive these big metal things called tanks. Back then, cavalry meant something else. Yes, sir.
A group of people, a group of riders with guns.
What did they ride?
Horses.
Horses. That's right. You see, it was very special to be a cavalry officer. And that's what Baden Powell wanted to be. Because he wanted to be able to make the difference for his soldiers. He felt he was a good leader. But you see, Baden Powell found out that he had a problem. He would go out to the different areas they were having battles. They would go into an area and they would win the war, win the battle, no problem. They were very, very good. The problems happened after. When they needed to occupy a space, keep things under control, he started losing soldiers. And these soldiers would die of really silly things. They'd get cuts on their hands or on their legs, and they wouldn't clean them properly. They wouldn't put bandages on them. They would get sick. They would get lost. They'd go out on patrol, and whole patrols would go out on patrol and never come back. And they would be found days later, some of them dying of hypothermia, which is where you get too cold. Others completely disoriented, having no idea where they were. And that's when Baden-Powell decided he needed to do something about this. So back in the 1890s, even before scouting ever began, he wrote a book. It wasn't a very big book. It was only about this thick. And that book had a special name. Does anybody know what it was? Has anybody ever heard of the book?
Me.
Yes, sir.
Scout.
You're close. What name did you think it was? Yes, sir.
Cub Scouts.
Cub Scouts actually didn't come around until the 1930s. But the truth is that the book was called The Aid to Scouting.
Yeah, I heard the
But remember, scouting didn't start until 1910. In all reality, it started in 1907. And here's how that worked. You see, Baden-Powell wrote this book, and it got published right around 1900. Then he became a cavalry soldier and an officer. And he went to South Africa, and he was put in charge of an area. But this area had a problem. You see, there were two groups that wanted it. There was a group that already lived there, and then there was a whole other group that said, we want to live there instead. But Baden-Powell knew what was right. And he had orders. You keep this area safe for this group. The other group was called the Boers. And they believed it was their divine right to take the area that they were trying to take away from the other tribe. So Baden-Powell got in there and he said, okay guys, we're going to protect these people. We have this nice fort. Let's see what we can do. And he found out he had only a few guns. He didn't even have enough bullets for all the guns. And not only that, he had maybe one box of dynamite. He had no barbed wire. He had no way to protect the fort. And the Boers were very well fortified and very well armed. So now we had a problem. He had to find a way to protect these people. So he started taking his ingenuity, his scouting experience, and putting it to work. First, he gathered up all the brooms and he cut off the whiskey part on the bottom. And he stuck the brooms outside of the turrets. Do you know what a turret is? When you're looking at a fort, can anybody tell me what a turret is? Yes, sir. There are machine guns on turrets these days, but back then, the fort had corners, and on the corners there were turrets. What is a turret? It's a place where cannons might sit, but it's actually the corner of a fort. And there's little slits in the turret, so that just the gun comes out. And he took the broomsticks, and he stuck them outside the little windows in the turrets. Now he did this because all they had back then, today we have sky satellites, and we have flying aircraft, and we have high definition photography. But back then, all they had was a spyglass. So they couldn't look very closely, because if you got too close, you could get shot at. So the spies would sit up on the hill and watch as Baden-Powell fortified his fort. So when they saw the sticks coming out of the little slits, they thought they were guns. And they thought, oh my God, he's got all kinds of guns. We've got to wait. But then Baden-Powell got even smarter. He wanted to make sure they couldn't get close at all. He went out with his troops and he put fence posts in the ground. And he spread them out over the whole front of the fort. And then, without anything in their hands at all, and wearing gloves like they were carrying barbed wire. Can anybody tell me what barbed wire is?
Oh, it's like a circle. It's got like little pointy stuff on it.
If you touch it, you can get cut, right? Well, back in that time, barbed wire was a good way to keep troops from attacking because they couldn't get through it. They'd get stuck on it and they'd get cut by it. So the barbed wire would go out in the front. And he could not see what he was doing, but it looked like he was putting barbed wire out. Then he went and got that box of dynamite that he had, and he took out each one of the sticks. And then he got a bunch of boxes. And he had his men go out, and they'd walk out with their shovels and a box in their hand. The box was empty, and he'd have them pretend like they were going around the barbed wire, and then they'd find a spot, and they'd dig a hole, and they'd put the empty box in the ground and bury it. It made it look like a mine. So now these boars are seeing these lumps of ground everywhere, but all they did was bury something. Every fourth or fifth box had one stick of dynamite. And so then he would take one of his soldiers and he'd have them walk out there, not paying attention, and trip over one of the mounds. And they'd blow it up. So now the boars saw one of them blow up, and the soldier was okay. He would trip and fall just to the side, so he wouldn't get hurt. But he'd get a scolding from the officer, "Don't you step near the mines because you're going to make them blow up." So the guys with the spyglass now saw mounds that blew up, barbed wire that didn't exist, and broomsticks that looked like guns. And for 6 months, Baden-Powell kept the whole boar army sitting on the shelf doing nothing. But he didn't stop there. Remember, I told you that Baden-Powell was an actor. Baden-Powell decided to create a character. He called it the Doddering Old Professor. He put on one of those silly pith helmets, which is like a safari helmet, and he wore ridiculously long shorts, and he wore a very tight shirt that didn't fit right, and he walked around with a notepad, claiming that he was from Her Majesty's College, and he was just making sketches of the butterflies. And he would walk around in their fort and draw. And all he was doing was drawing pictures of butterflies. They didn't know what he was actually doing, because in the wings of the butterflies, he drew pictures of where their guns were, and where their bullets were kept, and where all of their armaments were, and where the officers stayed. And at night, they would come back, and they would have surprise attacks. And for some reason, they always knew exactly where to attack the other group. So this kept the boars guessing all the time. They could not understand how it was that they couldn't get close to the other fort, but these guys kept being able to get exactly what they were trying to get at. They stole food from them because they were running out of food. They blew up their armaments so they didn't have anything to attack with. And he held them off for 6 months all by himself with the few soldiers that he had. He led them through. So at the end of the 6 months, he gets on a boat. And his boat takes him back to England. Yes, sir?
When he gets there, all these kids, they're holding up that book.
They're all holding the book. When he arrives on the docks, hundreds of young boys all are holding up his book called The Aid to Scouting. And they're doing this because they have been playing a game that they are calling scouting. And they are using his book to learn how to be woodsmen and how to protect themselves. And so Baden-Powell has this great idea. He says, oh my goodness, if I can get all the boys to come with me to a place where I can teach them correctly all of the skills in my book, then when they do become soldiers, they'll be the best soldiers they could possibly be, because they'll know how to protect themselves. They'll know that they have to drink water when they're out hiking. They'll know how to use a compass. So I'll protect all my soldiers. And so he took a group, and he didn't discriminate from one group to another. He gathered up people from all walks of life, rich and poor, shopkeepers. It didn't matter. And he took them to a place called Brown Sea Island. And there with his war buddies, they taught the boys how to do all of the things that were in his book. And in the morning they would learn about it, and in the afternoon they would compete against each other to see who could do it better. And at night they would gather around the campfire as Baden-Powell told his stories of his battles. Because now Baden-Powell was a war hero. And Baden-Powell thought finally he had made an impact on the army. He thought for sure that he had changed the course of war. But then something very bad happened. Something that he did not expect. A much bigger war than he ever expected to see. Anybody know which war that was?
Oh,
Yes, sir.
World War I?
World War I. And the trouble with World War I is that we were not very nice to each other. We used really bad stuff. We used chemicals. We used gases. We weren't very careful because we had found out about all these different ways to be soldiers. We were not discriminating on how we used it. And thousands of Baden-Powell soldiers died. So he thought that he failed. Because all the skills that he had taught those scouts as young men, they never got to use. Because they died before they ever got a chance to be in that position. So as the World War I ended, Baden-Powell realized he needed to change the direction of the Boy Scouts. By then another group had come about. It was called the Girl Guides. Most people think that the Girl Scouts came out of England, but in all reality the Girl Scouts is an American creation. The Girl Guides was Baden-Powell's answer to the Boy Scouts. And as time progressed, they started to develop something called Cub Scouts. And when they created the Cub Scout, it wasn't really called a Cub Scout to begin with, it was called a Wolf Scout. And as time progressed, they changed it up and they decided to call it the Cub Scout. And Baden-Powell decided that there was a new mission for the Boy Scouts. Notice I don't say the Boy Scouts of America, because Baden-Powell did not create the Boy Scouts of America. Baden-Powell created the scouting movement for the entire world. Baden-Powell decided that Boy Scouts and Girl Guides were the answer to world peace. He believed that if he could get to you guys and get you to be friends with each other across the world, that when it came time for conflict, you guys would already be friends. You wouldn't care if somebody came from another country. You wouldn't care if he came from another city or a different state, because you were all brothers. And you were mutual leaders. And if he could just teach everyone love and respect, that when it was all said and done, there would be no more wars. That we would learn to work together, to be peaceful, and to respect one another. Now, World War II came about, and there's been conflict since then. But as time has progressed now, over the last 100 years, scouting has now gotten into 140 countries. We are the only youth organization that has our United Nations. We push the movement of international relations across the entire world. And it all started because a man wrote a book called The Aid Scouting. We are the largest peace movement ever to form on the planet. There are more Boy Scouts and Girl Guides and offshoots from those programs like the Royal Rangers and the Girl Scouts. They all come from the same concept, from the same point. And all of them are based on the concept of mutual respect, understanding, and compassion for each other. So, feel honored because you are part of a special mission. Your mission is to go and help others learn the Scout Oath and Law and to live by those things. Because that's how we will achieve world peace. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it.
All right. Start your recording. Start recording.
Elias, stay up here just for one moment. Hey guys, everybody knows he's wearing a different uniform, right?
Yeah.
What is he?
Boy Scout.
That's right. Elias has worked very hard, and he advanced to being a Boy Scout sooner than several weeks ago, but he worked very hard to advance to Boy Scout before even we're doing our graduation next year for We Belows 2. He's worked that hard, so if you work hard, you can advance to Boy Scout soon. But who knows the highest award for a Cub Scout? You. Tell me. What's the highest award for a Cub Scout? Almost. Oh, yeah, it's in his head. Joe. Absolutely. Everybody see this right here? This is what you get to wear. One of the very few awards you can wear as a Cub Scout that you can also put on your Boy Scout uniform. This is a coveted award for all Cub Scouts. This is what you want to strive for as being a Cub Scout. This is the greatest thing you can earn being a Cub Scout. So, the Arrow of Light is the highest rank in Cub Scouting. It represents the conclusion of a Cub Scout's journey through the elementary school Cub Scout program and the beginning of the journey into Boy Scouting. Tonight, we honor one We Below Scout who has earned the rank of Arrow of Light and the right to wear this patch on his Boy Scout uniform. Elias Mulheim. Sir, congratulations. Here's your Arrow of Light. Congratulations on winning the Arrow of Light. You have shown that you have done your best. I challenge you to continue at this high level of achievement as a Boy Scout. Go on and get your Eagle Scout. To our guests and family here tonight, I want to present our latest Arrow of Light award winner. Please, would you please join me in giving Elias a standing ovation for his achievement for doing this?